Right, it's 1 o'clock thereabouts, so we'll make a start. First of all, if you can put your phones on silent or vibrate. Next, we'll come to membership of the committee. And looking round, we're all as is. Item 2, minutes of previous meeting. Can we agree on them? Thank you. Item 3, any interests or lobbying? No. No. Right, start with Paul.
Item 14 and item 16, we received emails on both.
Yeah. Carol. I think it's, yeah, with Bill. Yeah, myself, same for us all. Yeah, which, just for anybody at home that's interested, it's application number 2018-974, 2018-90163, and no advice are given. Next, admission of the public. It is a meeting that's done in public. We are webcast, so no swearing or chanting, stamping your feet, clapping. Item 5, deputations and petitions. No. This morning we did carry out site visits at Shelley, Sheepridge, Ashbrow, and Linley Moor, and finally at New Street. So now we'll move on to the applications themselves. Move to page 13. Matthew.
Good afternoon, members. I'm one of the senior planning officers, Matthew Woodward. I'm here to present a planning application for student apartment accommodation at the former cooperative building, which lies on the edge of Huddersfield Town Centre. So the site's on the slide. The site occupies a prominent gateway position on the edge of the town centre, just within the confines of the ring road. The site is within the town centre conservation area. The existing building is 4 stories in height, has a rectangular form, and comprises an extension to the original attached cooperative building. The original attached building was built in approximately 1893. The building which is the subject of this application, as I've said, it did form an extension to the original cooperative, and this was built in approximately 1936. The building's not listed, but it does benefit from an immunity from listing. However, it does fall within the southern section of the town centre conservation area, again as shown on the slide above. It is considered to represent an important building within the conservation area. So the elevation above shows the view of the existing building from New Street, and this highlights the contrast between the original cooperative on the left-hand side with the clock tower and the more intricate architectural detailing, and then you've got the extended building on the right-hand side. In terms of the design of the building, the window openings at first and second floor are relatively flat to the building facade. At the third floor, the fenestrations have a more vertical emphasis and are recessed from the front elevation. A blue canopy wraps around the whole building at ground floor level. When viewed from Queensgate, again, just representative of relatively simplistic architecture, and it's, as I say, it's relatively stripped back in comparison with the original cooperative building, which sits behind. And I'm sure you know the site, you've seen it today, and as I say, you'll know it from it being a prominent building in the town centre, but these are just a few photographs, and you can see the blue canopy, which is still in situ. So when viewed from the rear or the back of the building along Queensgate, as you'll see from the photograph, it's rather unsightly. It's somewhat neglected, and it doesn't really make an appreciable contribution to the wider conservation area. Now, the proposal itself comprises the change of use of the existing building and a 3-storey vertical extension to the existing building, so an extension at roof level, in order to accommodate the following, and that is student accommodation comprising 75 units set over a total of 7 storeys, including a basement floor. Altogether, there would be a total of 135 bedrooms in the complex. So the scheme would provide clusters of 3 and 4 bedrooms with communal kitchen and lounge areas. Each floor includes a combination of 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom studios with a 1-bedroom self-contained apartment. Now, the current height of the building is approximately 17.7 metres to eaves, and the proposed extension would be approximately 9.1 metres, but part of the proposal does involve lowering the roof or the parapet level, and so the total combined height of the building would be 25 metres. The proposal also includes renovation of the existing building, internally and externally, and it does include the removal of the canopy at the ground floor level. The proposal has been submitted on the basis that the market demand for student accommodation has continued due to the relative success of the university. The applicant is responsible for a number of other student accommodation schemes in and around the town centre. One example of these is up near the bus station, and it's called Standard House. You're probably aware of it. And this is the proposed elevation from New Street. Again, the contrast between the original building, the extended building, and then the more contemporary architecture associated with the extension. As you'll see from the slide, this is a computer-generated image, and it includes an indicative illustration of the extension. And it's more to give a representation of scale and massing, because I'll come on to the materials shortly. But it's suffice to say the colour of the materials on this CGI is perhaps not entirely correct at this stage. But the application has been through extensive pre-application, and you'll probably recall it was presented, I think, back in August 2017 to this committee. The applicant has taken on board those comments, and in addition, the application has been amended through the planning application process. And in summary, the scheme has been amended through pre-app and through the application process in terms of the way the extension is now recessed behind the main building facade, the addition of some architectural detailing, particularly to the fenestra, the windows, and an alteration in terms of the vertical proportion of the windows. So what officers have tried to achieve is to reflect more the existing window style on the original building through this proposed extension. The proposed extension would be clad, and as I say, this illustration doesn't depict the current position, because further discussions have taken place between the applicant, Historic England, and Conservation and Design officers. And the applicant now proposes an anodised aluminium product from a company which are actually based in Huddersfield. Now, in respect of the colour, it's considered necessary to ensure that there's a contrast between the original stonework and the proposed extension. And there are a number of options available. I think my colleague did show you some of the samples on the bus this morning. But in short, we are looking to encourage a bronze-type cladding which contrasts with the original stonework without it appearing too dark and overbearing. So it's trying to achieve a balance, really, between in terms of reducing the impact on the wider conservation area. Now, the materials themselves, the anodised aluminium product, is considered to be a high-quality cladding. There are some other examples. I've referred to Standard House. It isn't the same material as Standard House. It's an aluminium finish. And Historic England have advised on a suite of colours, being a dark bronze colour, which has been used on an example in a conservation area in Sheffield. So in summary, we are satisfied with the materials, but we are recommending conditions in terms of the colour to be finalised and the size of the panels themselves and how they are attached to the building, because obviously that's quite important in terms of how it would appear, given it's a very elevated extension. And overall, Historic England and the Conservation and Design team are satisfied, but it is subject to those conditions being attached to any consent. So that's the view from the front, from New Street, from Queen's Gate. The view from further along Queen's Gate, so from behind the building, as I've already alluded to, the existing building doesn't make a significant contribution, and it could be argued it detracts from the conservation area to some extent. This proposal, in effect, would tidy up the rear of the building. Clearly, the extension would still be prominent, but part of the proposal does involve improving the stonework on the original building and bringing it back up to a high standard. So officers asked the applicant to demonstrate that the impact on the conservation area and other heritage assets had been reduced as far as possible. One of the ways this has been done is in the way that the application's been amended. So the materials have been altered, the window sizes, the architectural detailing's been amended, and we're perfectly happy with that. However, the applicant has also submitted a viability appraisal which accompanies the planning application, and this has been assessed by the applicant's consultant and the council's appointed consultant as well. Now that is subject to, you have been circulated with a confidential paper with an appendices, so there is some confidential information in there, and it's at Chair's discretion whether that's discussed at a later time after this presentation. But the conclusions of the viability report clearly demonstrate that the extensions proposed are the minimum required to bring the building back into viable use, and therefore it does meet one of the tests set out in the National Planning Policy Framework in terms of demonstrating a viable use for a heritage asset, and that's set out in the officer report, so I won't read out the policy. So as I say, further details are set out in the confidential paper should members wish to interrogate the submission any further. In terms of the internal dimensions, all the apartments are well in excess of standards in what is considered to be appropriate amenity space for future occupiers. They are well proportioned. Just in terms of ground floor level, because some of the apartments are facing New Street, clearly there's an issue potentially with people looking into the apartments. So the applicant does propose a gap, so there'll be two windows in effect, to prevent people being able to look into the apartments. No existing properties will be significantly affected by this development. So in summary, the proposal, it is a large three-storey extension. It's already a very visible building, so clearly this will make it even more visible than it already is in the town centre. However, the impact of the scheme's been reduced to incorporate positive design elements which work to reduce the overall impact on the conservation area and the other heritage assets, mainly within that conservation area. The contemporary use of materials set within a more traditional design approach is considered to represent an appropriate response in this case. Now, there are benefits associated with the scheme, clearly. They involve securing the optimum viable use of the building and bringing it back into use for housing or student accommodation in light of the fact the council can't demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. That's a positive benefit. In addition, this part of the town centre has been somewhat neglected over the years. More than anything, this would increase the footfall. I imagine that a lot more people would be walking along New Street, so there's potential there to improve maybe open some new businesses on there, but certainly improve the economic prospects of some of the existing units, shop units on there. So, in conclusion, the less than substantial harm to the heritage assets identified is considered to be outweighed by the public benefits in accordance with paragraph 134 of the MPPF, and it's subject to the conditions set out in the update. Thank you, Chair.
We've got one speaker on this, and that's David Story.
Thank you, Chair. Members, my name is David Story. I'm a Chartered Town Planner speaking on behalf of the applicant. You've had a fairly comprehensive report presented to you by Mr Woodward, and obviously going back in historical terms, we went through a pre-application process with your good selves, took on board comments that were made, and through the process of this application, we've had a continuing positive dialogue with planning and conservation officers and Historic England, and we've taken on board every comment and recommendation to present the end result to you today. Just to sort of emphasise the recommendation by officers, this building has been empty for around about 14 years now. It is a high-profile building in terms of its location within the town centre, but it's in a very, very sorry state. Had you had the opportunity today to look inside, you would have seen that there's a need for significant works to bring the internals up to decent standard. In terms of the viability, the harsh reality is that, and the reason why this site's been empty for 14 years, is that no standard developer can come in here and make this scheme, or any scheme on this site, viable. The viability appraisal presented to you and independently assessed demonstrates that in its current form wouldn't be viable, and even with the extra 3 floors, it's marginal and way below industry standards in terms of expected profit. And the only reason why we're here today bringing this to you is because my client is a Huddersfield-based family company who have invested heavily in the town centre and can take a longer-term view in terms of returns. And I think we should be sort of grateful for that. The scheme itself is deliverable. We've been talking about materials, and I think you've seen a swatch of materials that were shown to you on the bus. These are materials that were suggested by Historic England, and there's a variation of the two, and we're arguing over which would be appropriate. I think the scheme is commendable in terms of bringing this building back into life. It's had a detailed and thorough assessment, and I would hope that you would support your office's recommendation. Thank you.
It's over to you. Yes.
A very, very quick technical question, if you like. Cladding, it's one of those trigger words nowadays that makes us worry. The proposed cladding, and I know aluminium can be flammable under certain circumstances, so are we satisfied that the proposed cladding is suitable for this sort of accommodation, relatively high rise? I wouldn't like to see a similar tragedy to us.
Through you, Chair. I can't give you the ultimate assurance because I've not been through building control, but what I can say is, firstly, it's a metallic product, and I don't know the details of some of the other tragedies that we've seen recently, but I don't think they were metallic products. Secondly, Historic England have recommended this particular material, and I do know for a fact that there is a building in Sheffield within the conservation area where it's been installed. It must have been through building regs, so it must have been found acceptable in that regard. So I don't have any evidence before me that suggests it's an issue at all.
Thank you. I've got a question and a comment. A question is about the back of the building. picture, or the design that we've been given, shows that it's all cleaned up and tidied up, but actually it's not an awful lot different from what it is at the moment. So I trust cleaning it up will make it look a lot better, because that is absolutely appalling, the back of that building. But I have got a question about the white canopy. Is it just the existing canopy there painted white? Has that just been used for illustration? Or what is actually going to happen to that canopy? Because if that canopy stays as it is, and even if it is painted white, it won't look much better.
Through you, Chair. The applicant might have to correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I understand the canopy isn't within their control. I think it does probably belong to Wilco's next door. So I don't think there's any proposal to alter the canopy unless I'm corrected otherwise.
And then, sorry, I've got another comment stroke question. I mean, we've read today in the Examiner about student accommodation being let as hotel accommodation down on St Thomas's Road. I've been a supporter of student accommodation until now, and I have felt the university has needed it. I felt the town has needed it. But I am wondering if we are, I know you've just said that we're not getting to saturation point, or the developer doesn't believe that we're getting to saturation point, but I do have a question over, especially again so many, though of course these will be more attractive perhaps than others because they are so near to the university. However, having said that, I've got doubts over whether these will continue, or how long these will continue to be student flats. I have to say, this building is in such a need, I mean, of renovation. We can't let, I think, an opportunity to renovate the building slip through our hands after all this time. It is so badly needed. I am happy with the design of the frontage. I think a lot of effort has been been made to, as you say, meet our demands at the last time this came before us. So I am happy with what I see. I will support it. But I do just have a slight niggle about the question of student accommodation and how long that will actually last.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I think one of the differences between this scheme and perhaps some of the other student schemes we've had in and around the town centre is, as I've said, the units themselves they're not the traditional corridor with a unit off the corridor, a single unit. They are divided into clusters. And looking at the submission in detail, the applicants acknowledge there is some flexibility in there. If market conditions were to change in future, there is an opportunity for them to apply for permission to change them into more high-end apartments, I'd suggest, but certainly to change the use to another residential type. So I think there is flexibility in there, but clearly the condition is proposed in this case to make sure it is student accommodation.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have a similar query about student accommodation, and I would like to think that I'm curious to know what the relationship is with the university. Does the university approve of this? Does it fit in with their requirements for student accommodation? Because on the face of it, its location is absolutely brilliant. It's only a few hundred yards away from the university, so you would think that it's in an ideal location from that point of view, particularly when you compare it with, for example, Stalls Hall, which is not a few hundred yards from the university. So I just wonder what the university's view is of this, and whether there is any mileage in putting a condition that restricts the use, although I hear what you say in relation to to Councillor Patterson's point. I can see that it would also be an ideal location for very good quality apartments in the town centre. Like Councillor Patterson, I am supportive of what's being proposed in general. I can remember this building being used by Kirklees Music Service many years ago, and I mean, since then it's fallen into really bad state. I am not a supporter of doing anything just to bring a semi-derelict building back into use. It's got to be the right thing to do for that building, and in general I think this is the right thing. But I just have one small query about where is the cladding being applied? Is it also being applied to the corner, or is that staying as stone? Because the picture that we've been shown from the front, if you like, it's not clear what's on that corner bit, although you can see the cladding on the top bit. And of course the other picture, the one from round the back, doesn't show the front at all, so I can't tell. It's a minor point, but I think given the fact that it's an ashlar building, that too much cladding would be unfortunate.
Yeah, Councillor Pinnock, I can come back to you on those points. In terms of your first point, we don't consult the university. That's the first thing I'd say. However, as I've alluded to previously, these apartments, I've seen the way that Standard House has been fitted out, and I'd suggest that they are high-end in terms of the way that they've been furnished and fitted out, and that would be replicated to some extent on this building. It would be a high-end apartment for students. Now, I think I'm right in saying that Standard House has been a success. There are other buildings within the portfolio from the applicant. I can't reference them because I can't recall exactly which ones they've been responsible for. But again, clearly there's a demand there because they've continued to build and to reinvest in buildings in the town centre. But the other thing is there would be some form of management. It's not just a case of build the scheme and then leave it to the students. There would be an active presence within the building to look after various things. So there'd always be someone there to make sure that it's kept up to standard. So it's not a case of it just being left moving forward. Now, in terms of, I think your second point, does it refer to, are you talking about the column at the front, if you like, the recessed column? Well, the existing tower, the existing column would be retained and made good. You can see there, it's not very clear from the drawing, but there are some deficiencies, as you can imagine, in the stonework, so that would just be made good. Now, the bit at the top, clearly that's separate, that's recessed behind a parapet. That would be clad, so the glazing there would be clad in the material that we've been discussing.
Thanks, Chair. There's quite a few comments I'd like to make. One of which is, I know we shouldn't discuss this in public, and I don't want to discuss it in public really, but about the viability, and it is down for zero value of the building as it stands. Is that taken into consideration, Matthew?
Through you, Chair, I've got to be slightly careful because I think they're the sort of discussions we perhaps better having in a private session, because it's difficult for me to explain without going through some of the financial information. But the figures that have been quoted are correct. The building clearly has been marketed by the council, so there is an agreement clearly between the council and the applicant. So the detail of which I can't really go into in public session.
It can't be zero value, that's all I'm trying to say to you, and that's in the viability status. But I can pick that up at a later date if you want. I can remember when we discussed this as a pre-application, and there was some concerns by the Heritage, the Civic Society, and they were totally concerned about this, any possibility of not retaining the Ashler and any extensions to be built in Ashler. So I don't know whether they've been taken into consideration, because obviously what we're being asked to do today is to make a decision on what outweighs the harm to the heritage, and I actually think that it would outweigh this. I think there is an issue here, and I don't know whether you, Nigel, want to come in on this, because obviously I think it must be a financial issue that they're going to a cladding rather than the Ashler stone, to make it in keeping with what we've got, what there is there already. I'm not saying I'm against this. I'm just saying that it's a possibility, obviously, that they've done it because it's a far cheaper product. Now, the only other thing with that is going to be the basis of how we're going to make this decision today. And, you know, I think we've got to think and consider what the Civic Society said at that particular time and what was offered to them as a way forward. Now, the other thing that I'd like to pick up on really is about your conclusion, and it's in 11.1. That statement there seems to contradict itself, Matthew, about the reason why we should be actually supporting this. Could you just actually go through that, please, for the benefit of anybody that's actually watching?
Councillor Kane, would you like me to read it verbatim? Would you like me to read it out? Because I can interpret. Well, no, I think the point I'm making in that paragraph is paragraph 14 of the MPPF states there's a presumption in favour of sustainable development, and in effect, there's what's called a tilted balance. So we should approve sustainable development. But there are restrictive policies under footnote 9 of the MPPF that state, and I'm paraphrasing, restrictive policies might displace that presumption in favour of sustainable development. And one of those restrictive policies is heritage. In this case, because it's found that the public benefits of the scheme outweigh harm to the heritage assets, the presumption in favour still applies. Had it been that we thought that the public benefits didn't outweigh the harm to the heritage assets, the presumption in favour under paragraph 14 wouldn't apply.
And what's your assumption of the public benefits then?
Well, the public benefits, I've set them out in the report, but in short, bringing a building which has clearly been derelict, underused or not used at all for a period of 14 years, providing student accommodation at a time when the council can't demonstrate a housing land supply. It's still a form of accommodation, residential accommodation. Increasing the footfall on that part of New Street, improving the economic vitality of that part of the town centre, bringing an iconic building back into use. The materials, as I say, there's some harm, but I do think that overall it would regenerate the existing building, because obviously a large part of the scheme does involve improving the deficiencies on the existing structure as well. So, in my view, the public benefits do outweigh the less than substantial harm. Had the impact on the conservation area been substantial, then the test would have been higher, much higher. And that this case, and the scheme of public benefits in this case probably wouldn't have outweighed the harm. But because it's less than substantial harm, it is a balancing exercise, and that's the officer's view. But obviously that's for you to consider.
Sorry, and that comes back to my original point: is we're here today. We see what outweighs the harm to the heritage, and that's what we've got to take into consideration today. And that's an opinion of us as members, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you, Chair. Well, one thing I'm very pleased about is that something is going to get done with this building, because it has been left semi-dereliction now for, 12, 14 years. A few years ago, it was suggested that the building would make very, very good hotel, and I think most people would have agreed with that. And 2 hotel groups were written to with the hopes that someone would take it on to build the building as an hotel. However, that didn't materialise due to the fact that the rest of the group, the 2 groups that were written to, had also got hotels in the near vicinity of the town centre. I can't complain that something's going to be done, but wouldn't it have been a good idea, when these plans were drawn up, to have the ground floor for retail? It would certainly help to rejuvenate, to regenerate that area of Huddersfield. Not just for footfall, but we're getting people on there to do some shopping. Quite a lot of shops on the continent and even in the UK nowadays, when they build hotels and apartments, the bottom ground floor or first floor is always shops. It brings people in, and it is a good idea. I would like somebody to take that on board, because at that end of town, with the actual building being the situation that it's in, there's very few people going there. And it would get people onto that end, because let's be fair, it needs the whole of New Street needs regenerated. We need to think of something, and we'd have a good starter there if we'd have thought about it for a good retail outlet there, or retail outlets. That would have certainly brought people in. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. That was looked at by the applicant, and we did raise that as part of the pre-application. The long and the short of it is, it's not viable. The building, the proposal is on the margins of viability as it stands anyway, and that's bringing it back into student accommodation use. The applicant did look at whether it would be feasible and viable to bring the ground floor units into retail use, and they didn't think it was. Now, I've set this out in the report, but I think because the building's been derelict for a long time, and it's been making a negative impact on the street scene. So even though the ground floor uses aren't going to be retail, I still think that you're going to get a more positive interaction with the street, and you're going to get an increase in footfall, because it's at the end of a parade of shops. I don't consider that the impact on the overall shopping parade is perhaps as significant as it would have been had it been smack bang in the middle, for example. And so, on that basis and on balance, I do think it's acceptable.
Don't you? Thank you. Well, I can't agree with that, because I can go back a long time. I used to go to school in Batley, and I always used to catch the bus to New Mill from where the Quap is now. That end of Huddersfield was always busy, because there was all the shops on there that encouraged people to go onto that end of town. There was never anybody but people on there shopping, and the Quap itself was always busy anyway. But that end of town, there was a good footfall, and there was a lot of people there. In fact, the whole of New Street was busy. It isn't now, but it was then, and it could be again if some thought went into it, and if you did put retail in there, it would be viable. Somebody would take it on, and they would make it viable, and it would take people on to the end of that town, instead of all going down to the bottom end of Huddersfield, where most people go now. The top end is deserted, and it really balanced it all. Thank you.
Any more comments? Questions? Do you think it would be a benefit to go into private session? Or not? Does anybody want to put anything forward?
It's just a small point, and may be answerable without going into private session. But Councillor Kane asked about the question of having ashlar facing the top part of the building, and whether I mean, I'm assuming there is a significant cost difference There is another question that I was going to ask then, which I forgot. What is the cladding going to be fixed to? Because that was one of the issues in the terrible fire in London.
I don't know the answer to your second question. I'm not sure whether might, but concerning the viability of the material, I'd suggest that the material that's been proposed isn't a cheap material. I think it is a high-end cladding. In my view, it is. Clearly, I would suggest it's probably cheaper than the stone, clearly. But I think the design ethos is to, when you're extending a building like this, there's a risk that you end up with a pastiche type development that doesn't really sit well with the existing. And I think with the materials proposed, there is a contrast there, but it is highlighting the old with the new as well. So I think the materials actually serve to kind of enhance the existing building. That's my professional view. I don't know whether Nigel, my colleague Nigel, you've got any comments to?
Yeah, I think it's important. Two things there, Councillor, really. One is the material. The current building is not solid ashlar. It's a concrete frame with ashlar slips, in effect. So it's not like a traditional Georgian ashlar building, if you like. So it's a concrete frame with these slips attached. Ashlar, even in a slip form, creates added weight, as you can imagine. And putting this building on top of 3 stories with ashlar would be considerable weight, for one thing. So that's one of the reasons to go for cladding. It's a structural issue as much as aesthetics and cost. We are looking for a quality, as Matthew says, of a high quality material. So I wouldn't have thought there'd be much cost benefit between the use of an ashlar slip and a cladded material. In terms of how it will be affixed, I think we're going to add a condition on there to how it's affixed to the building. And that's not just for your safety reasons, as you quite rightly mentioned. It's also down to how the cladding looks in profile, because there are examples when you see very thin boards on narrow rails and then thick boards on wider rails, and it can look a bit too much of a hodgepodge of styles. So by conditioning that, we can make sure it's a seamless type cladding system. So we'll come to that, if you like, as a condition, if that's suitable, Councillor.
Any more? I've got to say, I think in all committee meetings that I've sat on over years, this is just about the hardest decision that I've ever had to make. I can take points from everybody about retail not being up ground floor, about trying to regenerate and kickstart this end of town, because let's face it, God, it needs it. And it could be that this might just do it. This is how fine a balance it is. I gather that you can make a decision without going into private session. Councillor Patterson.
I can, I think, and I would like to move recommendation that we accept the officer's recommendation.
I'll second that, Chair.
Right, as I've said, it is hard, but I think it's a start. It might not necessarily suit everybody, but we're trying to do something with it. This has been moved by Councillor Pattison. It's been seconded by Councillor Pinnock. Those in favour, will you please show? Any against? That's 5 for, 1 against, so that application has been passed. Thank you. Don't run off, Matthew, because it's you again. Page 31 this time. This is the application at Ashbrow Road, Huddersfield.
Hi again, members. This time I'm here to present a planning application for residential development on land adjacent to Ashbrow Infant and Nursery School. The site comprises a domed, naturally regenerated parcel of land in a predominantly urban area. It's currently populated by grass, trees and other shrubs. Access to the site would be taken from an existing roundabout, which is on the southern boundary of the site, as you can see. The land rises up from this roundabout into the centre of the site by approximately 14 metres. The lower parts of the south-facing slopes are covered in protected trees, so trees with a tree preservation order. There are business and manufacturing units to the west, and there are residential properties on a lower level to the south. So the application can be split into two distinctive proposals. The largest proportion of the site is proposed to be developed as follows, and that is the erection of 110 dwellings comprising 29 two-bed units, 59 three-bed units and 22 four-bed units. 13 of these units would be affordable housing. The eastern portion of the site is to be developed, as you can see, into an extra care facility comprising 45 one-bed units and 5 two-bed units. These properties would be transferred to the council as social rented properties. Most of the land upon which the site sits is allocated as housing on the unitary development plan. The site is all allocated as housing on the emerging local plan, as shown above. And this slide shows the difference between the emerging allocation and the current allocation. So, as I've detailed in the report, some of the land on the very edge of the site is in urban green space. But moving forwards in the emerging local plan, the whole site is proposed to be a housing allocation. Apologies, just waiting for the slide. So in considering the impact on the green space, it's considered that a relatively small proportion of green space will be lost in this case. And as I've said, it is fully consistent in terms of its housing allocation moving forwards. So the layout's been mainly designed around the constraints, and the main constraints are that firstly the point of access is fixed. There's a mini roundabout at the bottom of the site, which you would have seen on the site visit, which was constructed as a result of a previous outline planning permission on the site for housing, which was never fully implemented, but a roundabout was installed. In addition, there are significant level differences. Mainly, the land mainly rises up from the roundabout to the middle of the site and, generally speaking, falls away at each side, apart from on the northern side where it gently falls away towards the school. As you can see from the indicative layout, most of the gardens are stepped, so there would be a retaining element and some terracing within the gardens in order to address the level differences between each of the respective houses. So that's the main way that the site's been designed to accommodate the change in levels. As you can see, most of the site is standard housing stock, a mix of semis and detached units. And then you've got the extra care facility in the corner of the site. Due to the scale of the development, as you can see from the plan, it is in a phased arrangement with the two phases in green coming forward first. So the two phases closest to the road and the roundabout coming forward first. As detailed in the officer report, there is a separate development agreement between the council and the applicant, which dictates the terms of a land transfer and when the extra care facility will be brought into use. But the main thing to take from the development agreement is that the extra care facility would come forward as one of the first phases, and all the affordable housing would come forward in one of the first phases. In terms of materials, there is no real distinctive type of character in terms of design or materials in the local area. The application proposes mainly red brick dwellings. 3 of the units as you come into the site would be an artificial stone type material, and the care facility would be a lighter brick colour with some art stone detailing. Full details of materials to be conditioned. This is just an artist's impression of the care facility. Just bear with me a second. And the top right-hand picture gives an idea as to what the care facility would look like as you come around the back of the site. The bottom pictures there show the care facility as you come into the site from the roundabout. And these are the elevations. So it's 2 and 3 stories with a single story entrance, canopy and communal area. In terms of other constraints, there are, this slide is just showing the care facility and how it relates to the existing nursery build, infant school and nursery and other properties. But in terms of other constraints, there are a number of public footpaths which surround the site. Those are highlighted in blue and orange. Originally, it was proposed to divert or to potentially stop part of the footpath, but following consultation with the Public Rights of Way officer, it's now proposed to retain them on the current alignment, so there's no proposal to alter the route of any of the footpaths. The footpaths all fall outside the red line boundary, outside the development site. So what that means is that the housing development and the rear gardens of which would be fairly close or very close to the footpaths highlighted in orange. Now, as detailed in the officer report update, the Public Rights of Way officer does request that improvements are made to these footpaths for a variety of reasons, but more so because the site at the moment is used as a recreational area for people to walk dogs and walk across. You can see on the site there are a number of informal tracks and trails, and actually people have not used the footpaths as they're set out on the plan. And the consequence of this development is that there wouldn't be access across the site as there currently is. So on that basis, the Public Rights of Way officer is requesting that some small improvement be made to the footpath, so clearing out vegetation, perhaps doing something to introduce some kind of surface so you can actually see where the footpath is. And that could be, there's a condition recommending those improvements. Of course, the consequence of having footpaths along rear boundaries and potentially a more well-used footpath is potential crime issues. So there has been a consultation with the Police Architectural Liaison Officer and the applicant, and the proposal now is to set the gardens back on the western boundary and introduce a landscaping strip, so a thorny type vegetation, something like hawthorn or something similar, within a 2 metre strip with some additional planting, and then a 1.8 metre high fence, potentially with some trellising on top of the fencing. So in terms of these properties where the mouse cursor is, that's considered to be acceptable. Moving up the site, the other properties, number 31 to 38, they're more constrained because the gardens proposed are already relatively small. So the solution here is to, because the land levels fall away from the site towards the back gardens, the solution here is to move the retaining element right to the back of the site where it meets the footpath, and then introduce some kind of fencing, perhaps more of a permeable type fencing along the rear boundary. And what that would do is it would improve the safety for future occupiers of the properties, but also improve surveillance of the footpath. So conditions are recommended to deal with the boundary treatments, and you'll see the comments in there from the Police Architectural Liaison Officer as well. In terms of trees, again, this is a significant constraint, but the main constraint is along the front of the site where it meets Ashbrow Road. The two big areas in blue there are protected trees under a tree preservation order. The bit in the middle, they're actually not protected anyway because the tree preservation order has worked around the access. And the other trees in blue are not protected, but the proposal is to retain all the trees surrounding the site, some of the trees in the middle, all the trees along the frontage, but then clearly all the other trees within the site and on the slopes will be removed. There is a landscaping scheme to try and compensate for the loss of those trees. Generally speaking, the tree officer he's made some comments about the loss of some of the trees and some concerns that the plans need to fully detail how close the excavations are going to be to the protected woodland, but that can be conditioned, and there are ways and means of protecting the protected trees moving forwards. As you'll see again from the update and the officer report, there is an objection concerning level differences, particularly the extra care facility, which is on a higher level, and in addition, planning policy does promote improved accessibility for mobility impaired and pedestrians and non-motorised users. And in that regard, because the extra care facility is on a higher level, the applicant has looked at alternative ways of trying to install some kind of wheelchair-friendly footpath down from the extra care facility onto Bradley Boulevard and Ashbrow Road. The consequence of this will be a loss of a significant number of protected trees, and therefore it's not considered feasible. The other option they've looked at is providing a footpath through the car park to the school, which I think you probably saw when you went on the site visit today, the school that lies adjacent. Again, that's not a feasible option. So the proposal is to follow the line of the proposed roads. Wheelchair users will be able to use the footways because they would be wide enough. The gradients along the road are between 1 in 15 and 1 in 20, so there are parts where it's slightly steeper than DDA compliance, but overall and on balance, the applicant has looked at ways of trying to facilitate other users as best as possible. As you saw from the site visit, again, the impact on neighbouring properties has been considered. I think the bus probably pulled up somewhere around where the photograph is. Now, the applicant's prepared some cross-sections to identify the impact on those properties. The application meets council standards. The gables are far enough away from the habitable rooms of number 160, as you can see on that photograph. Consequently, there are no objections. The impact's considered to be acceptable. Sorry, just moving on to the next slide. I'll carry on because the next slide covers the impact on other properties along the back of the site, and that impact's considered to be acceptable as well. The spacing standards are met in all cases. In terms of the benefits of the scheme, as set out in the officer report, the proposal does provide significantly more affordable housing than policy requirements. That is including both the housing stock and with the extra care facility. The area of POS that's proposed as shown on this plan is more or less in line with policy, but as you'll see from the update, there's a monetary contribution to an off-site play facility. Parking provision shown on this plan. Highways have raised no objections to the scheme. The impact on the junction with Bradford Road is considered to be acceptable. There is sufficient parking within the development to meet policy. And again, I'll just carry on while this loads up. But in summary, the proposal is considered to represent sustainable development. All of the consultees have responded with no objections, or if they have raised concerns, it's considered that they can be dealt with via planning condition. There is a legal agreement, section 111, and that details the education contribution and public open space contribution. There would, in addition, be a link to the development agreement in order to ensure that the affordable housing is delivered as well. So in summary, Chair, it's considered that this represents a sustainable form of development, and development should be approved.
Just got one speaker on this, and that's Hannah Smith.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Hannah Smith. I'm from Arup, planning agent on behalf of Keepmoat Homes. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today on this application. In developing the proposals, we have worked collaboratively with your officers to develop the scheme in line with local policy requirements. It's considered that the principle of housing on this site is acceptable in policy terms, with the majority of the site being an allocation in the existing UDP, with a small proportion of urban green space on the western edge, and with the emerging local plan reconfirming the entire site is suitable for housing. The site is being brought forward by Keepmoat Homes and Kirklees Council under a development agreement, which will bring forward market housing, affordable housing for social rent, and the delivery of an extra care facility. As part of this agreement, Kirklees Council will transfer the residential land to Keepmoat Homes, who will deliver the development platform and site infrastructure to support the extra care development, as well as open market housing. The extra care will be constructed by Keepmoat Regeneration, Angie, and handed over to the council on completion. The market housing units have been developed carefully to reflect affordability levels in the locality of the site and reflect average local earnings. The proposed housing comprises a mix of 2, 3 and 4 bed houses to ensure a mix of unit types, alongside 1 and 2 bed units within the extra care facility. The development makes sufficient use of the site, providing a density of 39 dwellings per hectare. The development has been designed to take into consideration the existing site levels and respect spacing standards to existing properties on Ashbrow Road. The rear gardens of the homes will be stepped to maximise usable outdoor amenity space for future occupants. Opportunities for improving accessibility of the extra care to Ashbrow Road has been explored with your officers, but would lead to significant tree loss from the TPO woodland area, which negates the delivery of this link. The proposals have been designed to minimise the impact on the woodland areas fronted onto Ashborough Road and tie into the existing public rights-of-way which run to the west of the site. Conditions are proposed to ensure that further dialogue on these elements of the scheme continue prior to works commencing on site. Subject to the committee's resolution to approve the application, the following community benefits will be secured: affordable housing at 39% of the development, open space delivery and a contribution to fund play space, a contribution towards educational provision and the provision of much needed extra care units, providing for a sustainable and mixed community in line with national planning policy. Thank you.
Councillors, it's up to you. Councillor Kane.
Can I just say, I welcome this, and I think it's a fantastic sort of opportunity to build on this piece of land, and it's quite interesting that it's been done in collaboration with our officers. But what I find quite strange is, and quite uncomfortable, to be quite honest with you, is the fact that we are putting these affordable homes in the bottom, plonking them in a bottom corner, really, just, and stigmatising these people, instead of integrating them properties within the overall site. I think it's important that we don't actually that we don't do that, and I think I don't know whether the design is part of this application or whether we are looking at whether we can change something on this, because for years and years, and I've got at least 2 or maybe 3 of these where they've put affordable rented housing into one corner and they're blaming them up there and other things for all the problems that actually happen on that particular scheme. And I think it's unfair, and as I say, I think it stigmatises these people. I think if we've done it in collaboration with Keepmoat, I think we ought to be ashamed of ourselves, because it's compounding all the previous sort of comments that have been made. So I would like to think that, although I'm welcoming this application, and I could actually vote for this, I think we should be looking at changing these affordable rented properties and put them to be integrated within the scheme itself. I'd like your comments on that, Matthew, please.
Thank you, Councillor Kane. Yes, I understand your point in terms of the properties at the bottom of this, or as you've referred to it as the bottom of the site. That would be slightly lower down, but I don't think it would be significantly lower than the main road. But that's an aside. The main reason why the affordable housing is proposed within this general area is because the phasing plan and the development agreement has tried to deliver, or has been agreed to deliver, affordable housing as soon as possible. So it's in phase 1. So I'm just trying to load up the phasing plan now to show what I mean. So phase 1, A and B, they would come forward first, and that would give early delivery of affordable units. Now, initially, through the pre-application, which you've probably not had chance, not seen, this part of the site wasn't housing at all. It was actually an apartment block within this general area. Now, the scheme's evolved not necessarily through dialogue with planning officers, but through the pre-app process, the applicant, following the pre-app response, has decided to change that apartment block to these units here. So, on the basis that they will be delivered early, we are comfortable with the affordable housing proposal, and in addition, strategic housing have been heavily involved in the site and have been supportive of the principle. And the other thing to note is that the applicant is providing in excess of policy, so not just the standard 20%. I think it's 39% overall.
With respect, I don't think that answers my question. I understand that you're wanting them to get into the earlier phases, and I can accept that. But it doesn't mean that they've got to be in... And in actual fact, they're the ones that's nearest the people that are already living there. I think it's unfair. I think it's totally unfair for this to be put there. You're stigmatising these people. I don't think it's something that can be just washed off by saying, well, it's in the first phase and we're going to get them as quickly as we possibly can. Everybody, if I tell you something, if you asked the people that would possibly be moving into there, they would rather wait a little bit, I'm sure, and go into somewhere that's integrated within the scheme. I'm fairly sure of that. They don't want to be stigmatised, and I think it's really unfair to them.
Thank you. I'll just, Chair, am I okay to come? Yeah. No, thanks, Councillor Kane. I know your point. Now, large sites, we would ask for it to be pepper potted around the site, and I think because this has been a case where we've tried to get delivery early on, it's been proposed in that location. I mean, I don't have a great deal else to add. I have heard your comments on it.
Thank you, Chair. There is something that I think needs to be said about this. It's on the same lines. Councillor Kane didn't mention it, but these houses are actually in a cul-de-sac off one of the roads. To me, that just makes it worse. It pushes people in a certain housing category into a small, dare I use the word ghetto? Is that allowed? But into a section on their own, and I totally support what Councillor Kane is saying, that regardless in a way of what size the estate is, I think to segregate people in terms of their housing tenure is a thoroughly bad procedure, and I really don't see why selected houses in those in the existing part of phase one can't be changed into affordable houses, and the ones in the cul-de-sac are, well, you might leave one or two there, but you should be talking about mixed tenure all over the estate. I think it's really unfortunate. Otherwise, I support the principle of development, and actually the way it's designed, I think, is very good in the way it makes use of the contours. But this is really unfortunate, and I think it will reinforce stereotypes that we're really trying to break down.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Well, these properties that are down to be built in Ashbrow, they're a mix of properties, so why can't we mix them? In other words, mix them about, because it's as everybody's saying, you're putting people in boxes and you shouldn't be doing that. It doesn't matter whether they're affordable, whether they've paid for them or not, they should be put as a mixture of properties within the actual estate itself. Then you would have no problems. And I have to agree with the rest of my colleagues on that one. Thank you.
Can I just sort of pick up on what Matthew said? Matthew is saying about this being in phase one or whatever. And if Keepmoor, and in fact our own officers don't want to do this at this moment in time, I would suggest that we defer this application and ask them to rethink it. Because I think we all think that it's unfair. It does nothing for social mobility, doesn't this? For people to be living amongst other people. And I think it's really, and you know, I keep saying stigmatising, it's stereotyping, it's all these other things. And I just think it's totally wrong in this day and age for people to be, so as I said, plonked in a bottom corner And I didn't say about it being a cul-de-sac, but it's obvious they're designed to be put out of the way, and in actual fact put as near as possible to the properties that are there already. I think it's totally unfair, and I think it's something as a planning committee we should not be accepting, and it's within our gift not to accept that. This is just wrong in this day and age.
I mean, there's one thing, years ago I was involved I was deputy chair of housing, and I got sent up to try and help sort out a problem that were up in this area. And believe you me, there were some big people there, and this was the kind of thing that what we've got today, you do not want to do this. Put people, you're going in that area and that's it. That's taking away community spirit and everything that we've been trying to sort out for the last 30 odd years. So I'm not too keen on having all these affordable homes just in one area. And another thing, let's be quite clear about this, it comes out at 39% affordable homes. If you do it properly, it isn't. It's 8.46 out of the 110 are affordable, and the reason why it's bounced up to 39 is because you've got 50 rooms in a care home. So let's be right about that. Apart from that, I like it, but we've got to be sure about it. Councillor Armour.
Yeah, thank you. Whilst I agree with what's been said about segregation, I want to just go off on a different tack now, if I may. We're looking here at quite a difference in ground level from the entrance from Bradley Boulevard, Ashbrown Road, going uphill onto the site. Now, something that we're missing altogether now is any thought about winter maintenance. Are we going to get any sort of grit bins? Are we going to get this and other similar developments added to the gritting routes? Because we're just locking people up during winter weather, and we just seem to ignore the fact at the planning stage. We know we've got plans with steep gradients. We didn't really ought to ignore that fact. Second point, which is specific here but generic as well, this is quite a wet site looking. There will be lots and lots of mud dragged down to Ashbrown Road during the construction process. Can we get any sort of conditions about keeping mud off the road? Because I've seen some horrendous sites recently in my ward. Can we do conditioning to make sure that the roads are kept clean? Thank you.
I'm going to say everybody else can quiet. Steve?
Yeah. Through you, Chair. Steve Sampson, Highways Development Management. In terms of the gritting bins, they haven't been designed within the scheme. We have problems. We can provide gritting bins within the scheme, but it's the actual ongoing maintenance in perpetuity. The liability to the council is quite considerable, given the topography. That's throughout the district per site, and that's ongoing. In relation to mud on the road during the construction phase, there is a condition for a construction management plan, which includes sweeping facilities and such. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Just to pick up on one or two of those matters. So, I mean, we listen to what you say, councillors. You know, you're not totally happy about the layout, about elements of affordable housing being in that one location rather than pepper-potted around. And Councillor Kane, you hit on the procedural issue there, that if you're not happy with it, then it's before you to defer it if you wish. The only thing I would reiterate with those comments is that obviously there's a lot of positives for this scheme, which you're aware of, which is the 160 units and an extra care facility, you know, that is in need within the borough and particularly in that area. So that is a very big positive to consider. As officers, we've tried to address all those issues. We've tried to address issues in a speedily manner. unfortunately, if that's what members are wanting, then there's only one thing for you to do, and that's defer it if you want us to relook at the affordable housing issue. Thank you.
I'd move that we defer it and ask them to relook at the design. Because in actual fact, if we said, well, no, we'll leave that decision to officers, it may be that there'll be more, they'll stay as they are. I think it should come back here with a redesign of where them properties will be. And still put them, if you want to put them in phase one, then that's fine. No issues with that. Just put but as long as they're not just put in that particular location. And I'll move that, Chair.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Nick Hurst, Planning Officer. This proposal seeks a change of use and alterations to extend an existing car park at Ashbrow School. You will recognise it as being adjacent to the previous item. The application is brought to committee in line with the delegation agreement, as it does represent a departure from the UDP, the Unitary Development Plan, and the draft local plan, as it is for the extension of a car park as opposed to housing. Currently, the car park has 25 standard and 2 accessible parking spaces, with a one-way system following the route of the cursor. The proposed layout would extend to the the east and west side of the car park, and would alter the internal layouts to provide 32 standard parking spaces, 5 wide vehicle parking, 4 accessible parking spaces, and 2 drop-off points, along with a provision connecting the rear of the parking space to the access of the school. And I'll quickly run through the photos of MOA members visited this morning, with the school being located here. Of note, next to the site is an area protected woodland. The car park would extend closer to this particular tree here, coming out approximately 2 metres along this plane. The report in front of members outlines the Planning Authority's considerations on the proposal. In summary, while the proposal does represent a departure, the proposed encroachment into the housing allocation is minimal, with the enlarged area of the car park not to project into the wider greenfield allocated for housing. So the rear of the site here is not to go beyond the red line into the housing site. I am aware of members' determination on the previous item, but it does demonstrate that the site can be laid out appropriately without including this aspect of the site. Officers do not consider the development harmful to the implementation of the proposals in the plans within the Unity Development Plan or the draft local plan. Furthermore, weight is given in favour of the application, as it would enhance the facility of the school and the local highway network. Therefore, in these circumstances, the material planning considerations are deemed to justify a departure. Turning to the local impact, there are no concerns regarding amenity. As detailed within the update, following the provision of further information from the applicant, officers are satisfied that development would not harm the adjacent protected trees, subject to an agricultural method statement to be secured via condition. As such, officers recommend approval. Nothing further to add, Chair.
We've got one speaker on this, and that's Dora Plant.
Apologies, Chair. Just to further add, there is also to be a condition added for a construction management plan, which was not provided in the update.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on behalf of the children and staff of Ashborough School. I'm Dora Plant, the head teacher of Ashborough School, and I have been so since 2001. The school has increased in size in response to requests from the local authority to provide additional places for primary-aged children at Ashborough School. Currently, we have 452 children on roll, and the car parking spaces do not meet the needs of the school. The school is located at the end of the cul-de-sac, which creates challenges for residents as well as the children, staff and visiting professionals. In January 2017, pupil representatives of the school council met with ward councillors. The children focused on what has been done to improve safety around the site. This includes a staggered start and finish to the school day, walk to school initiatives. Groups of older pupils also conducted traffic surveys and made a recommendation to the governing body, which was followed up with the employment of a car park attendant for an hour before school and after school. The governing body also met with residents of the cul-de-sac and took their comments on board, particularly with regards to the development of an additional footpath. The protection of the sycamore tree was flagged up at the end of term a few days ago, and this generated significant interest to the children, particularly the children in sycamore class itself. The classes in the school are named after native trees, and the school values trees in the environment and has planted over 50 trees within the school site itself within the last 4 years. Pupils of the school council also requested that drainage be improved to avoid some of the huge patches of standing water which subsequently froze on the car park during the recent cold weather, creating real hazards for all users. We recognise that the proposed additional 14 car park spaces will not alleviate all the car parking challenges. However, they would improve access around the site, provide a neater, more managed appearance, and improve safety by a more coherent layout. We do hope that you'll be able to support the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Members, Councillor Patterson.
No, I will declare an interest. I've got grandchildren at the school, so I know what chaos there is, even with the improvements that were made a few years ago when the mini roundabout was put in and the bus stop signage and the yellow zigzags on the main road. In fact, that actually made the issue worse for this school, because all the parents that used to park on the main road on Bradley Boulevard now can't, and so everyone is trying to cram into this tiny car park. So any improvement has to be an improvement. I mean, the fact that the school now has to employ not just one, but I've seen 2 parking attendants there at times. I mean, it's a waste of resources, really. If we could find better parking, and also, I have to say, better owners of cars that want to park them. It amazes me how people have to park within an inch of the school, but they do. I've certainly seen, because of the chaos here, parents with children with disabilities trapped in their cars in as far as they can't move away until another 6 or 7 or 8 cars have moved. No doubt that happens to staff as well. Their cars will be blocked in, and they do have to move around, not just at the beginning and the end of the day, but sometimes during the day as well. So it was certainly empty today when we went to saw it, and the pictures that we've seen also show that it's empty. But it's rarely that. I can atone to that. So I will certainly support, and I will recommend that we accept the officer's recommendations here.
Thanks, Carol. Councillor Cade.
Can I just say I'm glad we took this one after the previous one, because and seriously, I'm not against it. I think, you know, anybody that's living anywhere around the school with, but like I do, they realise that the parking is just horrendous, and that's one of them things. It's a sign of the times, I'm afraid. And the one comment I'd like to make on this, and this is really something what I said on the bus this morning, that is that it seems, again, we've been quite hypocritical here. We've been asked to accept that this is a departure. This land was allocated as housing, and to allow us to go ahead with this, we'll be losing 4 houses. We haven't enough houses as it stands, but what's 4 houses when you get when you alleviate all the traffic problems and irate mums and dads that are dropping off? But I think it's a little bit, once again, it's a bit of an hypocrisy. But I'll second what Carol said. Thank you.
Any more comments? Councillor Armour.
Chairman, I live nearby, and I often find myself driving on Bradley Boulevard at school times, and it is quite horrific. I think it's a good idea to make more off-street parking. There are a lot of children attending the school. A lot of them are transported by private car. I think it's a good idea. I'm in favour of this. Thank you.
I'm going to say it's nice to see a school that can just expand its car park a little bit. When you look at some of the car parking, what we've got around schools, it makes you wonder who's been driving. This is being moved by Councillor Pattison, seconded by Councillor Kane. Those in favour, please show. Thank you. That's 6 for, none against. Next, we move up to page 61. This is the application at Linleymore Road, which we did visit this morning.
Thank you, Chair. Victor Grayson, Senior Planning Officer, standing in for the Case Officer Bill Topping. This is an application for full planning permission for the erection of a new building accommodating a motor vehicle dealership with hard surfacing to provide 548 car parking spaces, soft landscaping and a new vehicular access. The site is almost opposite the Wappie Spring Inn. To the west of the site is the relatively new Les Joffres industrial building. To the east, on the other side of the public footpath, is the Max Truck site. To the south, on the other side of a 30-metre landscape buffer zone, is a residential development currently underway around Farriers Way. The site is not in a conservation area. There is, however, a Grade 2 listed boundary stone on the pavement directly outside the site. In the unitary development plan, the site is part of a larger site allocated for business, general industry and storage and distribution, i.e. B1, B2 and B8 uses under policy B2. Part of the site along the road, Linleymore Road, is allocated or identified as a buffer zone where policy B3 in the UDP requires land to be kept free of industrial buildings, requires tree planting or other screening, and only allows car parking where neighbour and visual amenity would be maintained. A green corridor has also been designated in the UDP along the road, and policy D6 requires safeguarding of this. In the emerging local plan, the site is part of a larger mixed-use allocation for housing and employment. In terms of the planning history, members may recall that in 2015, part outline, part full planning permission was granted for a larger site, the Peat Ponds Farm site. This image is one of the approved drawings from that application. Plot A is the area I'm circling here on Linleymore Road, part of which has already been developed for the Les Joffres industrial site. The current application site is roughly where I'm circling now with the cursor. Together those form Plot A, which was granted planning permission, outline planning permission for B1C, B2 and B8 uses. To the east of that, Plot B is the Max Trucks site, which was also granted outline planning permission for B1C, B2, B8, and that has been developed as well. And then Plot C, the largest section of the wider site, was granted full planning permission for residential development, 252 dwellings accessed from Crossland Road. This is a fairly old aerial photo. Members visited the site today and will have seen that it doesn't look anything like this anymore. But this image just illustrates the location of Peat Ponds Farm and the location of the Wappy Spring Inn, which is still there. The proposal is for a single-storey, albeit 8-metre high building, which would have a mezzanine in part of its interior. This building would accommodate car showrooms at the front, the north end of the building. Then moving south, behind the showrooms would be managers, sales and back offices. Then a drive-through service passage. Then MOT workshops and a valeting area at the rear of the site. The building would be clad in profiled steel cladding in 3 shades of grey, and there would be glazed sections in the elevations. The majority of the site would be hard surfaced to provide 548 spaces for cars. These will be variously allocated for used car sales, demonstration cars, customer staff and visitor parking, car storage, cars being serviced and courtesy cars. Up to 87 people, and that's a mix of full and part-time jobs, will be employed at the site, although it should be noted that the development would amalgamate and relocate workforces of 2 existing dealerships in Huddersfield. In terms of land use, although the proposal is for a sui generis use and not a B use as allowed for in the site allocation and as per the outline approval, this is still an employment use and it is proposed in a sustainable location. The proposed use is therefore considered acceptable. The highways impacts of the scheme are unlikely to be significantly different to those of the approved B1, B2, B8 scheme, for which appropriate highways improvements were secured. A grampian condition is recommended to ensure that those improvements not yet completed are completed in connection with this development. And if I could just turn to the committee update that was released yesterday. Some rewording of the highways conditions is now proposed by officers. It would be the words after the final semicolon after the words travel plan, and it will be along the lines of secure provision through a section 278 agreement of signalised junction and speed management measures referred to in the 2015 hybrid permission prior to any works commencing on site. Travel plan monitoring fee of £15,000 is also considered necessary. In terms of design, the proposal is considered acceptable. The building would be comparable in scale to neighbouring buildings. The large expanse of car parking is unfortunate, but it is unavoidable for a development of this nature, and proposed in adjacent buildings, soft landscaping and boundary treatments would help limit the visual impact of this part of the proposal. There's just a 3D image of the proposed building. Residential amenity will be protected by the 30-metre wide landscape buffer along the south edge of the site. Planting is proposed along the front of the site as required by UDP policy D6 and the Green Corridor designation. Drainage is considered acceptable, subject to a condition requiring confirmation of the final surface water runoff rate. Preparatory works and site contamination investigation and remediation have already been carried out, and the site is ready to receive new development. 3 representations have been received, 1 in support of the proposals. 1 objection has been received from the Lindley Moor Action Group, and I just draw members' attention to the further information in the committee update regarding the Action Group's objection to the proposals. And a further objection has been received from the adjacent site developer requesting the previously mentioned Grampian condition that would require the implementation of the 2015 approved highways improvements.
Approval of this application subject to conditions is recommended. Thank you.
Right, first speaker that I've got for this is Mike Chalker.
So I'm objecting to this application on 3 grounds: jobs and growth, air quality and transport. Firstly, please can you confirm how many net new jobs are being created by this development? The application suggests 87 jobs, but as this is an amalgamation of 2 existing dealerships in the centre of town and on Leeds Road, surely that's not going to change, or possibly would even decrease because they've been amalgamated. Secondly, this site is parking for 115 vehicles, but is in very close proximity to 2 air quality management areas. The one in Lindley, on Lindley Moor Road and Ainley Top, and also Newhay Road at Outlane. Why has no air quality impact assessment been carried out? Thirdly, the transport plan submitted refers to legacy data from 2014 and 15, and prior to significant local developments, as you've seen from the graphics shown and what you'd have seen this morning. This makes irrational assumptions as to how people will travel to the site. Namely, they will simply follow the Lindley Ward profile of using buses, bikes and trains. Has any current transport assessment been rigorously reviewed, or is this just another case of negligible effect and no concern for cumulative impacts? Because certainly as a car dealership, there'll be an awful lot of people, hopefully, travelling to test cars around there, up and down Lindemore Road. That's it, thank you.
Next, I've got Mark Beavers.
Members of the Planning Committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Mark Beavers, I'm Planning Manager at Harron Homes. The decision to make a representation on this planning application has not been made lightly, and we regret that we feel the need to appear before you. But we do consider that the actions of the applicant have raised concerns which we feel need to be addressed by Kirklees Council. Outline planning consent was granted in 2015 for the wider development of land surrounding this site. In order to make this development acceptable, off-site highways works were required to take place. In order to ensure the delivery of these works, Harron Homes, Taylor Wimpey and Stirling Scotfield entered into a collaboration agreement which legally obliged each party to undertake different elements of work and pay necessary contributions. One of the obligations upon Stirling Scotfield was the construction of highways works along Lindley Moor Road and junction works at Lindley Moor Road and Crossland Road. These works should have been completed before December 2017, so Stirling Scotfield have reneged upon their obligations, and despite our continued attempts to discuss and support the completion of these works, limited details have been provided. The condition also provides a unit cap by which the necessary works need to be completed. This is 126 units, and the cap is likely to be reached towards the end of this month. The Council have already supported Harron Homes and Taylor Wimpey by choosing to enforce the cap and not the date within the condition, and continue to work with us by looking at options to increase the cap to 150 units, and we thank the Council officers for their support in this. But this support is only necessary to provide Stirling Scotfield with the time they need to complete the works, which they have been obliged to deliver for a number of years. We continue to be given verbal assurances by the applicants that these works will be completed, but their actions thus far do not give us confidence that this will be the case. The relevant highways works have not been commenced despite the obvious eagerness to deliver more development on the site. Members will have seen from our previous written representations the wording of a condition that we have recommended. This is a standard highways condition which we feel meets all the tests, and we understand today I've just heard about the update and the condition that's recommended, and in principle that sounds acceptable to us. We've always maintained that Stirling Scotfield have no objection to our representations if their commitment to the delivery of these highways works remains. These highways works would need to be completed imminently, and this would free them to deliver the developments sought by this planning application. The non-delivery of these works could result in the cessation of the residential element of the development and the potential mothballing of both the Harron Homes and Taylor Wimpey sites.
I note that the recommendation before members today is to delegate approval of the application to officers so that the conditions can be finalised and the Section 106 executed. We do not want to prevent this development, so we're happy with the officer's recommendation, but would ask members to make it clear that if this is delegated back to officers, that it comes with very clear instruction that the attached is pre-commencement condition. And it is important to us that this condition is pre-commencement, as any later trigger points will put the continuation of the residential development under threat due to the immediacy of the trigger point within the outline consent, an immediacy which has been caused by Stirling Scotfield's inaction up to this point. Thank you very much.
Next, we've got Joe Flanagan.
Thank you, Chair. I don't intend to repeat the content of what's a well-balanced, thorough, comprehensive report undertaken by the planning officer. I'd just like to highlight some key points relating to the application. The proposed development has been assessed in detail by the Council's officers and a recommendation of approval has been given. The proposal would create 87 new jobs, both part and full-time. The business has a potential to become a major local employer, supporting economic development in the district. The site is part of a wider area, as you have been shown, that has existing planning permission for both residential and employment use. The site has been fully remediated previously and the development platform has been created ready to receive such development. The proposed development accords fully with the existing permission by providing employment use that is compatible with the two adjacent businesses. The proposal also responds to the allocation of the site for employment use within the Council's UDP and the draft allocation of the site as a larger mixed-use housing and employment allocation. The proposed development is fully policy compliant, therefore, with both the adopted and emerging local plans. The applicant has worked cooperatively with the Council's professional officers throughout the determination period. All planning matters, including highways and drainage and infrastructure improvements, have been agreed. The application has no outstanding objections from any statutory consultees, and the proposed conditions have been drafted by officers, including the one mentioned today, and have been accepted by the applicant. The application was subject to public consultation and, as we've heard, received two objection letters, one which can be addressed through the highways improvements, and a further letter of support from a resident recommending the proposal would generate business in the local area and reduce traffic congestion for the town centre. The applicant is committed to signing the legal agreement that includes financial commitment to a travel plan monitoring fee. I would therefore invite members to offer their full support for the proposed development in accordance with the officer recommendation and to support economic development and employment creation in the local area. Thank you.
Next, we've got Laura Hunter. She's gone. Oh, right. Right, it's Stephen Holman then.
First of all, thank you for allowing me to address committee. My name is Stephen Holman and I'm here as a representative of Stirling Scotfield. I'm sort of going off script now on what I originally was going to say because of the potential recommendation, which is not what I expected officers to have reported to you. And the other thing is, I'm here really to answer the issues that Harren Home have raised. Yes, Stirling Scotfield are contractually obliged to provide the Section 278 works to Lilymore Road and to the junction with Crossland Road, and I acknowledge that the timescales have slipped. I was here today to try and give you some comfort that the works are being progressed, unlike it's being suggested, and that there is a time frame for them to be brought into operation. A lot of this, though, was dependent on the granting of this particular planning consent and the income generation that this planning consent will give to Stirling Scotfield. I've had a number of meetings over the past week with senior officers on how we get over the problem of the timing of the works and the bringing forward of the development. I was under the impression that we had an agreement to that. And similarly, I had a meeting with senior directors of both Heron Homes and Taylor Wimpey yesterday evening at their offices in order to put forward a proposal that would give us all comfort, which effectively is the depositing of cash sums with the council to guarantee that these works are actually provided and giving the council the money to carry out the works. What I was actually hoping that the condition that was being suggested by officers today would be that prior to the occupation of the car showroom, the works would be in place, and that obviously gives us a 9-month timescale to actually provide them. Unfortunately, the suggested wording that I've heard is before the commencement of construction. What that would mean is that the provision or the construction of the car showroom would be deferred by at least 9 months, when actually the Rybrook, the operator, they're actually were hoping to start in June of this year. And I was looking to propose to complete the works during the construction period, so by the time the critical element of opening the car showroom was here, then the works would have been completed. Thank you.
I did have Mark Hemingway down. I'm sure I've seen him leave. Yeah. Right. Before we go to officers, members, Steve, you.
If I can put some clarity on the sort of mechanics of the condition, what we're asking for is actually some comfort in the works being provided. So the condition would be, this is not per word for word, before development commences, there should be provision for the signalised junction to be provided. So my understanding is the detailed design is already in place for the junction. It just needs to be entered into a 278 agreement, which would actually meet the condition. So if the money's put into the council account so we can get on and build it, I agree it will take 9 months to build it, but the council will have the money, the detailed design has already been carried out. So it's about actually the upfront costs of a bond so we can get on with the works. So it's not about waiting 9 months, but we will be able to progress the works. Does that make it any clearer? Thank you.
Right, thank you, Chair. One could get a bit sniffy about this, actually, and the issues are those that are raised by the Lindemore Action Group. This use is not B1, B2 or B8. It's something different. And car showrooms are called sui generis because they are different. They tend to have lots of vehicles outside the premises. That's one of the ways in which they are sui generis, in other words, of their own kind. I'm not sure I want to support this simply because of that, because it produces a completely different element into an area which has been allocated for business and industry, and I just think that although business and industry is not especially pretty, to have a site with a whole load of cars outside it, I'm not sure I think is any better. So you may say I'm being pedantic, but you might very well say that. But I in its present, and listening to all the issues involved in the technicalities of developing the site, which I perfectly well accept, I would rather not have this at all. So I'll leave it at that at the moment and let other people speak.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I've got to tell you, on what I've heard and what I've read and what I've heard here today, I am not happy with this job at all. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't sound right. Apparently, the basics are that there should have been some information signed up to with the council and other parties to carry out S278 works. These have never been signed up to. These should have been finished in December 2017. These have never been finished. So that means at the end of the day, if nothing ever gets finished, we as a council could be picking up this bill, and we don't want to be picking up any bills at all. It was signed off there to everybody else to get on with what they were doing and to finish it off. It hasn't been finished off. I'll make no comments about the car showroom. I would have thought it would have been better for light industry because that's what it was designed around, and it certainly isn't going to be that. So at the end of the day, we don't get what we've asked for. In other words, what it says on the tin you're not getting. And we certainly aren't getting what we expected, and we're expected to vote this one in while officers decide whether they're going to get these people to sign up to this S278 agreement, which they may or may not do. If they don't do, then we pick the tab up, and I'm not in agreement with that either. So it isn't going to get my support. Thank you.
Councillor Kane.
Chair, I think Councillor first picked up on a couple of points that I was going to pick up on. But it's really about completing these works and whether these should have been done in 2017. Why haven't we enforced this? I find it quite strange that we browbeat officers to ensure that we get these proper conditions put in there, and then when it comes to people complaining to us as members that these works haven't been done, we've got to go back to officers and say, why aren't you enforcing that? And I think it's ridiculous. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. If that work was supposed to be completed in 2017 in December, that work should have been completed at that time or thereabouts. And I have to say this, Steve. I think Mr. Sampson, I'm saying it as if we're talking to somebody listening in and watching in, but the fact is that I think you've changed the goalpost even from this morning when we had a discussion, because we said that, given that the information that was provided to us by the two emails that was passed on to us, that we felt that under no circumstances were we going to put the council into a position where they would have to pick up any outstanding works that's incomplete, and that this would be a proper Grampian, and that work would be done prior to the commencement of the actual development itself. Now, you haven't just said that. I think you've changed it a little bit this afternoon, and you agreed with what all members on that bus were saying, because we didn't want it to be an issue at a later date. We wanted it to be sorted out here and now before that development actually started. Now, I'd like you to explain that, Steve, if you can, please.
The end product would be the same, because the council wouldn't be put at risk. The money would be deposited before development commenced. So we would get the full amount, including any abnormal costs, which the depositor would get back if it wasn't spent, and then we would go and build the junction. So the junction would still be delivered.
Sorry, I'm going to ask you a question in return. Sorry about that, Steve. But this was also about the outstanding works, the highways works as well, we discussed. There's other outstanding highways works. Is that money going to be allocated as well to the local authority?
My understanding in relation to Plot A and the outstanding works, it's the speed management along Linley Moor Road which would be included in the 278 agreement, and the signalised junction. The works along Crossland Road are being undertaken now by Harron Homes, so there should be no more outstanding highway works. This is the last element of the master plan. So,
sorry, I think it would be the full value of them signal works, the money that's going to be allocated to.
How the condition would be wrote, yes, we wouldn't. The condition would not be met until the 278 contract and the monies deposited was signed and agreed. So you can either do it now, or you wait till it's built before the development can commence. But that would put the development at risk for the funding. I've done it. We've looked at it.
I understand exactly what you're saying, and I've no issues with that. And I don't think anybody wants to. Well, Councillor Pinnock doesn't like the development. I think there is other arguments with this, but my specific sort of issues is about putting the council at risk. And all I'm saying to you is that the full amount of that, of the signals works, is going to be put into, is it escrow or whatever, is going to be put into there prior to that work, any works commencing. Is that correct?
Yes, it will be in the council's pocket.
Right, you've answered my question. That's fine.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Question to the guy from Highways. How much of the S278 works has been carried out? Is there any to do? Has it been started? Has it been carried out? What is to do with the S278 works?
In relation to the junction works, the full detailed design has been carried out. In relation to the speed management, there's been a reduction in speed along the speed limit along Lindemore Road from 50 to 40. That may be altered in relation to the signals when they're put in place. So there's still an element. In relation to works along Crossland Road, Harron Homes are undertaking those works, and they're probably around about 50% complete. I'm looking over at Mark. Yeah, but that's underway, and that's been overseen by our highways design colleagues. In relation to a footpath works that runs diagonally across the master plan site, they have been completed.
Why has it taken so long when, under collaboration agreement drawn up by all the parties, including our council, to carry out these works on Lindemore Road? Why were they not completed by the end of December 2017? This is what we're asking. It's now April 2018, and it isn't even finished yet. And we've been taught to agree to something that really is up in the air at present, and it could cost this council money. And I don't want to cost this council any money. I think we pay out enough to people who will let us down. And I just want to know why officers haven't sorted this out. Well, about 3 or 4 months. So why haven't we done anything about it? This is what I'm asking. Why have we done nothing about it? Why has it come to us as a planning committee and said, look, this is fine, you just vote for it, it'll be all right on the night. It ain't all right on the night. It's all wrong. And I'm not getting any straight answers. Simple as that.
I think one of the things is with this today, I've been reading emails this morning and last night, and one of the things is when you're the councillor, by Christ, if you make a slip up, the public jump all over you, and we're putting ourselves, or we could be putting ourselves in a position for that to happen again, and it's not on. These decisions should be sorted, work should be finished before we move on to the next phase, and not having discussions at big planning meetings like this. Paul?
Can I just... My approach was exactly the same as what you've just said, Chair. And I seriously, I've no issues with that. And, if anybody wants to move something, that's fine. But I do have to say that what Steve has said today is that if that money is actually deposited in escrow, we've got that money. And I don't think there's an issue there. What we do need to understand is when that money comes in, we want to, because we can serve stop notices on work and everything, can't we? If we don't get that funds, we want to be in a position where we know for a fact that money has been deposited, and to enable them to go forward to actually develop. I think that's the issue, and I can understand Sterling Scottsfield's reluctance to do it prior, pre-commencement. I can understand that because they want to get on with the works. But if they deposit them funds, we've got that money. That money's there to pay for everything. And I want you to make sure that it is the full amount of money as well. Make sure that everything's there and we've got everything that it will take to actually complete them works that's outstanding.
Thank you, Chair. Picking up on one or two things there. In terms of the condition, obviously you see the recommendation before you with a condition. Now, the precise wording is obviously not being concluded at this stage, but what Steve has been alluding to is that we would look to secure that funding as quick as possible, and also to secure the works as quick as possible, and that's the quickest route that Steve has suggested there for you. In terms of the council's position, the condition on the outline consent is enforceable. Yes, we haven't taken enforcement action as yet, and the council have to be seen as to be acting only when it is expedient to do so. And from the officer's perspective, we haven't reached that level yet where it is expedient to do so. You will note on the outline condition there are 2 trigger points for it to be fully implemented by. It is either the end of December 2017 or by the completion of the 126th dwelling on the residential scheme. In other words, it is biting on both elements of that hybrid application, both the industrial and the residential. So I know we've heard different sides of the story here from 2 different speakers, and we have to act reasonably, and that is the reason why, as officers, we are recommending a condition, a pre-commencement condition, all right, with the wording that Steve will work up, to secure that junction improvement as quick as possible. So I just wanted to allay members' fears with that. The council is securing the position by getting that condition on. Now, in terms of 1 or 2 other elements that were raised in terms of air quality, the air quality issue was dealt with at the outline stage. So mitigation measures and funds were raised, at outline stage, at the hybrid application stage. The improved cycle route and pedestrian footpath was implemented as part of those mitigation measures. So there were also points about, I think Councillor Pinnett raised about it being a sui generis use. And yes, okay, that doesn't fit entirely with an industrial allocation. However, on the whole, with there being 3 plots, this is one development, and the other plots have been industrial. You will also note that the emerging local plan, that is for employment uses. So yes, there are 87 jobs, I think. And there was a question about whether they are new jobs or existing jobs. Well, let's just say that they are being secured because there is an amalgamation of sites. So that is some of the issues I just wanted to touch on, and that's all for now, Chair. Thank you.
Yes, Chair. Well, can I put a deferment on this plan until the money is in the bank at Kirklees so we can carry on doing this? Because the 126 dwelling of Allen Homes will not be actually made habitable until the end of April, apparently. So they've got till the end of April. If we put a deferment on this till the money's in the bank, when the money's in the bank and they start the work, then we can come sit back here again and decide what we're going to do. That's the the way I would see it. It's a safeguard for us, for the council, for everybody. Because believe it or not, Mr. Chairman, I don't believe everything everybody tells me anymore. I'm very cynical. And I think this has been one of the most cynical things we've had to do for a long time. That's what I would like to do.
Bring somebody back.
Until the money's in the bank and we can start the work. If the property, the 126 property is ready for habitation on the 30th of April, then fine. And the money's in the bank, fine. Then we can go ahead.
Right. Can you throw some light on this? This is something that at this committee we never do have a debate in council chamber, but it is. Yeah.
What I can say is approximately £800,000 is currently sat in an escrow bank account for these works. At the moment, it would need the consent of Harry Holmes and Taylor Wimpey to release those monies. Now, those monies will be very close to the cost of the works. That's why they're in the escrow account at the moment. So, what you're sort of asking for is an escrow account on an escrow account. Yeah. Now, if Harry and Taylor Wimpey and Sterling Scotfield would be prepared to release those monies for these works, then I can say on behalf of Sterling Scotland would be prepared to do that. Whether Harry Holmes, Taylor Wimpey would be prepared to do that, I'm not sure.
It's
I'd have to get that confirmed, but the figures I was talking to our design.
I've sort of probably got more knowledge and understanding than the officers have on certain aspects of the job. In respect of the Lindley Moor Road works, the 278 agreement is almost ready to sign. So it's not to say that it's been ignored. The contract with the highways contractor is ready to go, subject only to the payment of the monies. And we were anticipating that highway works would commence on the 24th of April.
We've had this put forward by Councillor Firth to defer this until this. Councillor Armour, you'll second it. That is to defer this, and we want that money by end of April. Are those members, are you in support of this or no? Those in favour of the deferment, please show. Those against? One. One abstention. So we're deferring this. I think, we're making the right decision, personally. Thank you. Next, page 73, and this is near Bank at Shelley.
Thanks, Chairman. Louise Beercroft has been the case officer for this one, but she's absent. So, as we saw this morning, this site is located to the south, just to the south of Shelley Settlement. It's in the green belt. It comprises an existing stone storage yard, stone merchant's business located off near Bank. Here's the access road off Brookhouse Lane. Barncliffe Mills is to the south. Here's a slope going up the embankment up to Shelley. The adjacent site is beneficial tree care works at the end of the lane, and there is some screening between the existing access and the site from coniferous trees. There's the site entrance. The site is relatively flat and comprises areas of outdoor storage with a number of skips, metal storage containers. The operational developments included in the development are a 1.8 metre high green powder coated palisade fence around the boundary, the construction of a concrete base measuring 14 metres by 17.5 metres with a covered log store which would sit on approximately 1/3 of the base. That was the area where the minibus turned round, so the log store would be located just to the right of the entranceway in there. The change of use is considered to be an appropriate use within the green belt. It is on a brownfield site, which is one of the exceptions under NPPF policy 89. It would not have any greater material impact on the openness, and the visual amenities of the green belt would not conflict with the purposes of including land within the green belt. The laying of the concrete base and the fencing would have some impact on the openness, but in terms of the scale of those, as they are only very minor elements, don't think that is going to be adversely harmful to the openness of the green belt overall, because of it's in amongst existing buildings. In respect of highway matters, the site is accessed from a private driveway. The volume of traffic has been considered to be comparable to the existing, and my colleague Steve will come in if there's anything that he needs to comment on. There is a public right-of-way, Kirklees 147/10, which follows the route across the northwestern part of the yard, and this would have to be diverted, and this could be done by a scheme that would be required by a condition, but the actual process of diverting it is obviously through different legislation. The nearest residential properties are off near Bank to the north. This is a picture of the log store on the concrete plinth. That's all, Chair, for now. Steve?
Through you, Chair, we have received some further information of the makeup of the proposed traffic generation. It's foreseen that there will be some articulated vehicles accessing the site, and we're expecting, but this is only 3 to 4 times per year for larger wood pieces, and it would be a 30-ton articulated HGV. For current operation, they use pickup vehicles with wood chippers on. So, and they do say that the actual stone yard have an average of 5 deliveries per day, some by articulated vehicles. Councillor, you may be a bit more savvy to that, aware of that, sorry. Thank you.
We have no speakers on this. We've paid the visit this morning. Who wants to go first? Councillor Armour.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I did make clear, I have concerns about large vehicle access to the site, and in particular about the junction of Nearbank with Huddersfield Road at Shelley. As I demonstrated to colleagues, it's a very, very difficult junction to negotiate. I would like to see this go ahead, but I would certainly want pretty strict traffic management to prevent large vehicles using the junction in either direction with Huddersfield Road, between Nearbank and Huddersfield Road. I would like to see an absolute block on large vehicles be expected to use that. More generally, I have had complaints about this site in the past. The complaints have been about dust caused by stone cutting. Very happy to see that stop. I know there may be thoughts around whether the stone would actually be moved. Personally, I'm not bothered whether it's used for the storage of stone as well as logs, as long as we get away from the stone cutting aspect of it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Firth.
Yeah. I really think if you're going to deal in trees, then you should be dealing in trees. Then the stone should be got rid of. Because that, that's quite big, and if you've got a reasonable surface on it, they'll be able to store a lot of wood there. And it's fairly well screened to the north, to the north of the septic chalet. It's screened with trees. In actual fact, I travel that road quite often, and I didn't even know that place existed till this morning, seriously. Because it's well in. And I don't think there's a problem. Did you stay in the stone? No, it's right up that long road. And you just pass the gate in, you never think to look at what's down there. And as I said, no, it's, I think it would far better think to stone, personally, as Bill says, if there's no stone put in, that is not going to get any problems, are you? Probably a bit of sawdust, but apart from that, that's all I'm going to say on it.
Peter Rabbit's happy. Councillor Kane.
Chair, I think I said it this morning. I think there is a danger there of it becoming a mixed use, and I'm going to bow to other people's sort of knowledge in the fact and acceptance of the fact that they live up there and I don't, and there's issues there, to be quite honest with you. But I think it'll end up where you will have stone at one side, logs and timber, and it's quite strange that there were a fencing company just round the corner. I'm pretty sure that they'll be cutting these logs down for fencing panels and whatever. And I do think that obviously nowadays a lot of people enjoy the gardens and whatever. That'll be a fairly successful entity in itself. So I think either we do restrict it to just timber and not stone as well. But I'd ask you, David, as the planning officer, I know it's Louise's, but to ensure that we do one or the other. I think because what Councillor Armour did say is that leave the stone there and stop the cutting. You ain't going to do that. I'm sorry, they're not going to store that and not going to cut stone. You might as well just say, well, carry on as you are. You can use half of it as logs. So I think we should restrict it if it's going to be a change of use, a full change of use, and make a time scale as to when the stone has got to be removed, which is a big operation.
Andrew, and then Bill.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'd like to support this, but I think there should be a traffic management condition in the list of conditions. I assume that can be enforceable because it's a new application for a different use from what's there already.
Bill.
Thank you. There is a point that's raised tangentially there, but the application as it is for a tree/log storage yard. Now, I would not expect this application to lead to timber cutting, because there's nothing here that says anything about manufacturing, about cutting down trees. It says storage of logs and timber. And I would hope that will, not on site, I would hope that will be enforced, because we're not giving permission here, if we give permission, for people to work on timber. We're not giving permission for sawing timber. We're giving permission for storage of logs and trees.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few of those very valid points. Yes, it is feasible for us to attach conditions regarding the use and to state what products or what items will be stored on the site. So I think that's, a very sensible suggestion that we can include in the list of conditions. The problem we have is that the existing use for obviously stone, for a planning permission to buy, and in terms of the tests that we are required to do for conditions, would mean that it's very difficult for us to attach conditions on the existing use of the site. Now, legal advice has told us through Joe that we may be best doing that through Section 106 agreement if members really wish us to improve the visual appearance of the area prior to this planning application being implemented. So if members really want an improvement visually and that's stone to go, it's not something we can do through this planning consent in conditions. We are able to attach conditions regarding usage and items for storage, and if members wishes to do that, we can implement those. Thank you, Chair.
With officers to work through conditions, I mean, there's a hell of a lot of stone to shift out of there for one thing. Yeah, there is. Yeah.
Chair, we'll include that condition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's to keep it as dusty as possible,
Yeah.
as quiet as possible.
That's not a problem.
Right. Yeah. So if it all goes pear-shaped, David, it's your fault. Those in favour, please show. 6 for, none against. Finally, page 81, and this is, we've been here before, nursery at Fenny Lane, Fenny Bridge, Huddersfield, Fazana.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Fazana Tabassim. I'm the Planning Case Officer for this application. The application relates to a site off Fenny Lane covering an area of 1.25 hectares, as shown encompassed within the red line on this slide. This photo shows the site in the context of the surrounding area. The site is served by an existing steep access in the northeast corner of the site from Fenny Lane, as shown in this photo here. Over two-thirds of the site was, up until June 2017, occupied as a planted nursery and accommodates level concrete areas of hard standing, 2 permanent buildings and a number of dilapidated polytunnels and open growing beds throughout the site, as shown on these photos. The application seeks permission for the change of use from plant nursery garden centre with retail sales and the formation of a new vehicular access in the opposite end of the existing access off Fenny Lane. So these are the plans for the new proposed access in the northwest part of the site onto Fenny Lane. This is a photograph of where the new access will be cutting into this embankment here. Sales at tills are proposed to take place in one or both of the permanent buildings. The buildings, together with the polytunnels areas, as shown on the plan outlined in green on this plan, will be used for display of higher value stock and will include ancillary cafe and toilets. This will cover an area of approximately 970 square metres. The formation of a new access will require excavations of the existing embankment and construction of retaining walls. The next 2 slides show an illustrative drawing of how the proposed new access will look on completion and once the landscaping has established. The existing access is proposed to be closed off and hours of opening will be restricted to those set out in the agenda. The site lies in an area of greenbelt and will remain as greenbelt in the emerging local plan. The application is brought to committee as the site exceeds 0.5 of a hectare and relates to non-residential use in accordance with the Council's delegation agreement. No representations are received. An application was approved in December 2015, which expires in December this year for an identical scheme. The supporting statement with this application basically states that this current application is submitted to extend the previous permission for a further 3 years until a developer comes forward to carry out the development. A detailed assessment is set out in the agenda, which sets out there being no significant change in circumstances or policy since the last permission. On this basis, officers are again supportive of the proposal, subject to the conditions set out in the agenda, which will include controlling the use to a garden centre only, and with the retail sales and ancillary cafe toilet areas restricted to the areas hatched green shown during the presentation. The recommendation is therefore to delegate approval on the issuing of the decision notice to the Head of Strategic Investment to complete the conditions. If you can refer members' attention to the update, the agent has sent in a letter. He was unable to attend the committee today and requests that if members do not accept officer's recommendation, the application be deferred to allow him to address any issues or concerns that might be raised. Thank you, Chair.
Members? Yeah. Yeah. Are you moving it, Donald? Yeah. And I'll second that. Are we in favour? Please show. 6-0. That's it. Thank you very much for a very enthralling day.